Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Workpapers Best Practice webinar. It's just gone 2 o'clock. My name is Matt Crofts. I head up the Simple Fund 360 team and I've got over 25 years experience in the SMSF sector. It's really my job today is to really take you through a pretty snappy 30-minute presentation with the key objective is to step you through some of the key features of Workpapers and I hope to introduce some best practices into your firm that you can take away from today. Bit of housekeeping to get started. The webinar is being recorded, so you don't need to take furious notes. Attendees will receive an email after Easter break with a link to the recording. We will have 5 very knowledgeable team members joining us today from BGL. I've got Jeevan, really the creator of Workpapers. I've got Jimmy, Anthony, Ryan, and Norman. They're looking after the questions. So please use the Q&A. There'll be a button, depending on what software you're running, for Q&As. Please use that. This is really your chance to reach out and tap into the knowledge that these guys have around Workpapers and really use that as an opportunity. So what we're covering today is really about best practice around how to use digital Workpapers. And when I say digital, it really means trying to keep everything electronic. No real paper records anymore. It's really a number of benefits that come from this. Personally, I changed my Workpaper processes, the funds I administer, about 2 years ago to go full digital. Last year, it was so much easier than the first year. So I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks around that. It's really the traceability when you've got everything digital. You've got a lot more transparency. And I think that's critical, certainly in the current environment that they're facing, some in the office, some out of the office, that transparency, being able to see what's happening with the Workpapers. There's some really clever, smart integrations I'm going to show you today. So they're really next generation. So I want to show you some of those. And then there's been a lot of new features. So if you looked at Workpapers maybe 2 years ago, maybe even 6 months ago, there's always constant changes coming in. So we'll talk a bit about the digital communication. And then some exciting stuff. Mid this year, we're going to be releasing our solution for trusts, companies and individuals, and Workpapers are available for our beta clients using those tools right now. If you're interested in looking at trust companies or individuals, just register on our website for Simple Invest, it's called, and you can have a look at those Workpapers and see whether you can get some consistency there as well. So what I thought is the best way to step it through Workpapers and how to sort of get to best practice is tackle the different people that are using Workpapers. And I know it's going to be a little bit different. We've got different users here today. We might have some partners, some auditors, there might be some processing people, but I'm going to sort of step you through, from preparation, review through to audit and cover these sort of main topics. So I'm going to jump into the live software at the moment and just give you some basics. If you haven't seen Workpapers, it's located under the reports menu and the Workpapers option here. One thing I always like to show people is you can use the shortcut key. You can just type question mark on your keyboard. It brings up this shortcut menu and you can just type in Workpapers and that will take you there as well. Okay, so it's always a quick navigation tool that you can use with the question mark. There's the first tip of today. What you first need to do when you jump into Workpapers is generate the Workpapers for the year. It starts as blank. And then if I click this generate Workpapers, I'm going to actually generate a Workpaper for 2021. So I'm going to select a preparer. It selects me by default because I'm the user logged in. Then I'm going to type in the reviewer, Jeevan Toki, and it's going to set the start date to today's date and then just 7 days due date, but you can adjust those. These preparers and reviewers here can be changed later. They're not locked in stone. There's a lot of flexibility. So if you've got a scenario where you have multiple reviewers or multiple preparers, don't worry. You can just set the initial one and then you can always change it. So we'll generate that. At this point in time, what it's doing is it's running all the trial balance information, all the reports. What you'd commonly, what I used to do before work papers is I'd go into the report screen and I'd have a work paper pack sitting in here. I think I've still got one probably in here. Yeah, tax working papers. And then, all these sort of working paper type reports you generate and then you'd sort of file it, whatever you were using, Adobe or Excel or file systems, folder structures, you'd do that. So really what WorkPapers does is take all that process away from you. It basically generates, you can change the year. So you can see here, it all starts with 2021 is not started. All right, and it's generated all the different reports into the document screen. So for example, something like dividends, you'll see it's run the investment income comparison report. You can preview that very quickly. So it really just does a lot of the work for you in that initial generation of the reports, and it links into the various trial balance here. Okay, so we can upload documents in 2021, right? Just a quick tip, and you can still be working on 2020. There's no problem with that. It's very flexible. So quite handy if you're up-to-date processing, you can create the 2021. I'm doing that for some of my funds and uploading, documents as they come through into the 2021 year while I'm still working on the 2020. There's no issue there as well, at all. So a couple of things. The basic structure is you've got your trial balance type view, or a lead schedule as some people call it. And it links all the transactions, every account with a balance. So each fund, is going to have slightly different investments or slightly different expense accounts. It will tailor it to that. And then down the bottom, you'll have your more financial statements, permanent docs, other docs, stuff where you can it's not tied to a specific chart of account. It's something that is more tied to a particular process. So a handy tip that you may not be aware of, if you do upload something to permanent documents, if you go in there and you attach a document, that will roll forward to the next year. Okay, so if I create the work papers for 2021, after I've uploaded that into 2020, it will automatically copy across. It's only doing that for the permanent docs and the estate planning area. So it'll copy that across. Quite handy if you're going to upload a trust deed in there and you want to be checking that trust deed, if they're starting a pension, it can be stored there. And that's what I mean by full digital. A couple of other things I wanted to show you. There are, some people don't quite realize they've been using it for a while, but there are these filters at the top where you can see what's ready for review, what's in progress, what's completed. You've also got the comments field here. Turn off that filter. So you've got the comments filter here where you can just see any work paper that's got comments. And you've got the warnings here as well. I'll talk a bit about that later. Back to the comments, quite a handy tip is you can just hover without having to go into the work papers and see all the different comments. An internal query has been raised where the income comparison report wasn't matching. And then, we need to check some overseas shares records. So that was completed. So you can see a quick snapshot without drilling into each work paper. You can see the individual comments here, but you can also see it on that summary page. The other things you can do is regenerate reports from here. We'll talk a bit about the observations later. You've got this standard checklist here where you can mark as all as completed. You can add a quick custom checklist. And that would just be a once-off for this fund, where you could attach an additional checklist. I'll show you a bit later where you can do it permanently as a template. But that might just be something fund specific you want to add a checklist for. And then you can see the comments here. You can reply to comments, you can edit comments, you can attach them to particular investments is what I've done. And you've got a number of different options here that have been wish listed. So you can say the different statuses. And that's what I was talking about earlier with transparency. You've really got a lot of transparency now with comments and being able to view those all in the one location. The other couple of nuances with work papers is it will tailor them slightly different depending on what account you're going into. So if I go into the 5,000 account, being the members, you'll see the table here is quite extensive. It's got opening balances, contribution income, earnings. You can see it, closing balance changes. So this gives you a quick snapshot. You know, that looks very unusual, 81% negative, something's going on there. So you can see the table changes a little bit. The other sort of difference tables that you'll sort of see is also in the investment accounts. So if you go to one of the investment accounts, 776, I think most people know that if they've been using Simple Fund 360, or if you haven't been using it, shares in listed company, you'll see the units and last year's closing balances and the changes. So you've got this quick snapshot so you can review it. And you'll also see this updated status. That basically means that I have changed something since I initially created the work paper. So it's a bit of a warning, hey, there's been an update to these investments. You might want to regenerate the reports. And that leads me in, this is where some people get a little bit confused and probably a little bit hesitant, is this refresh work paper function. Okay, so it's important to understand I've created a point in time record when I first created the work papers. I've uploaded documents into the system. And if I'm going to refresh the work papers, none of those documents are going to disappear. None of the checkboxes that I created, so any of these checkboxes won't disappear. What's really happening is these trial balance type records, GL records, and these reports are going to get regenerated. And that's really where the time saving comes in. All right, so I can jump back into work papers. I'm going to refresh that work paper. And it will tell you here that it will make those changes and it will change the status. If it comes across anything that has changed, it will change a completed status or a ready to review status back to rework required. It's just trying to indicate to you, hey, that's something you should be looking at. So it's trying to indicate to you there's a bit of workflow there. So you can regenerate that. And this is where the time saving, you'll see I can still keep operating. It's going to generate 25 reports for me. You can see this one's changed to rework required and a bit of an update. All right, so the status has changed there, but I won't have lost any of my checkboxes, okay? They're all still there. I won't have lost any of my documents. All right. Any documents I've attached will still be there. So that's refreshing the work papers. Now everything's updated. That point in time has changed. How many times have we come across in our accounting career where the reports don't match, you know, the statements don't really match what's the financials have been signed? So this is where you can really have that traceability. You know who's running these refreshed work papers and, you know, who hasn't updated a particular work paper here. When I go into it, if I go and update something, regenerate the reports, change the checklist, it'll basically mark that as completed. And you'll see now that updated has disappeared. Okay, so I know I've reviewed that and it's gone to completed. The other thing I wanted to show you here was just a quick tip on uploading documents. I do see some people, going and attaching documents individually. So you can drag and drop a file here and just do one at a time and upload that. That's fine. You'll see it get added here. You can do a quick preview of that document. Okay, at any point in time, you've got that ability to preview. But sometimes that can be quite time consuming if you're doing it individually. I even see some people upload directly to the sub account, which takes even a little bit longer. You've got that option as well. So it can attach directly to the sub account. What I see is probably a good practice to look at is jump into the document screen. And this is quite handy where you might have a scenario where you've got a lot of documents. You might have an external document management system and you just want to drop a heap of documents in one sort of foul swoop. So I can go into documents, begin the upload process, and then just select multiple docs. Okay, I'll open those and then I'll upload those. All right, so they'll all get stored in the documents. They'll be stored there forever. Then if I jump back to work papers, and I'll just go to warnings just to narrow it down. And here, what I can do is then just still attach documents. But what you'll see is those ones I just uploaded appear in the top of the list there. So it's just that little bit quicker. When I've uploaded them as a batch, I can then just attach them, just as one button. So I can just attach that record, go to the next one, and keep going through that. Okay, so that's just a quick tip there that you can achieve a little bit more efficiency, a little bit of a 1%er. The next thing I wanted to show you is really what's improved recently is the ability to notify the reviewer, or the preparer. So you can send an email through and say the entity is ready for review. So I can quickly do a bulk update like this. I can just select all the work papers. I'm happy with them. Change the status. So I'm going to do it in one foul swoop and just say, okay, these are all ready for review now. So they'll all update to ready to review, and then I can notify the reviewer the entity is ready for review. So that's what I'm talking about, full transparency and doing it fully digital. It's now going to send an email. You'll see something like this pop up in your email. So this can, automatically be stored into your practice management or your Outlook system. And then you've got that correspondence of going back and forth between the reviewer and the preparer. So it's just sending a link to log in. It's mentioning the name of the fund. And that's just helping with a bit of that communication, especially if you're working from home. So the next phase I wanted to sort of show you around best practice was some of the review steps. Now, some of these, you might be the reviewer and the preparer. That's, for small firms, we understand that. Everyone's got slightly different processes. So the system's fairly flexible. But this is what I really see as one of the big value adds of having the digital part and the data and the documents connected into the work paper. So I'll go through the warnings, observations, and a couple of other sort of more review features and a couple of settings here. I'll do this live. All right, so the warnings, this is really the game changer as far as I'm concerned. What you can see is I've got a number of warnings appear, and I'll start with the first one, and this is really what we call the smart part of work papers. You'll see in here, it's like this extra pair of hands or eyes, if you like, that's checking through the ledger and saying, hey, you haven't processed a distribution tax statement for AMP for platinum. So I can just click on that. It's looking at the data underneath. And there's the platinum. It can see there, it's got some system tax data. I can process that, generated as marked as reviewed. All right, so it's gone into reviewed. And that will basically tick off. If I refresh the work papers like I did earlier, that will then be ticked off. I can tick it off anyway, but it will get rid of that particular item. All right, that's quite clever. It's really like the second pair of eyes where it can help you go through. The other thing I quite like is the dividends as well. You've got this investment income comparison report. But, traditionally what I would do is just check all these figures, look for what's unreconciled. That's fine. But now I've got this extra pair of eyes where it's actually looking at the data underneath as well. So it's looking and saying, hey, you've got a couple of unexpected items here. Here you can see it's an international one, Intuit International. So you would need, I've just put a note down here. I need to check some dividend records and just make sure, foreign tax credits have been processed, especially if it's a substantial amount. So it's this extra pair of eyes where it's looking at the data underneath, okay? And then notifying you with these warnings, observations. The next one I wanted to show you was, things like contributions. It's so hard to keep up, as a practitioner with all the changes. You've got AWOT changing of contribution caps, you've got the 5-year carried forward, you've got the NCCs, you've got the total super balance you've got to manage. So this really just helps you look at the data again, and it's saying, okay, I've got a member here that's made a contribution mandated over 75. That's a bit of an alarm bell. I've also got him exceeding his NCC cap. All right, so I can go and do some further investigation and just think about that. If I've got a partner on the line, think of, basically capturing that early, and someone that may not have a lot of experience with SMSF or is getting into SMSF, they can be much more aware and dig into these warnings, okay? So that's quite intelligent, as I said. That's really one of the best practices in having the data all stored in the solution. The next one was, I wanted to show you, the next warning was around investments. And in here you can see, I haven't done a great job on corporate actions here. I've skipped a few. So it's looking at the corporate action database and saying, hey, you better review these corporate actions. There might be something that's delisted. There might be something, the market price here. Traditionally we had those on the create entry screen, but now we're pushing them into here so that when you're doing the work, you're much more conscious of the checks. So have a look at that. That's warnings, observations here for the shares. And probably what I find quite magical, in fact, and I know there's going to be some skeptics out here, and it is really starting to happen where machine learning and our smart doc engine is really getting more and more intelligent. It's really augmenting your processes. Now, what I mean by that is I uploaded before a Bank of Melbourne work paper. I did it pretty quick. I did that on purpose, but I uploaded that Bank of Melbourne work paper into here. All right, I've sanitized it all, but even with me sanitizing it, I've basically, something we do as accountants, I think it's, 101 accounting, is we'll be checking, it's one of the first things you do is you check the bank balance is correct at 30th of June. If it's not correct, you've got an issue. You're missing either transactions or something has seriously gone wrong. So I uploaded that bank statement. What we used is our Smart Docs engine in the background, our machine learning, AI for people, that don't believe in AI, but what it's doing is it's reading this bank balance. It's looking for 30th of June, the same way I look for 30th of June. It's got two 30th of Junes. It picks up that balance, the last 30th of June, and then it does a comparison to the balance here in the ledger. All right, so it's doing that comparison and it's coming back saying, Matt, I've found this issue. The statement balance does not match the account balance in Simple Fund 360. All right, that is what I'm really seeing where machine learning's heading. You'll see us do more in that, but we're mostly doing it with bank statements at the moment. That's where we've got a lot of documents. And the more documents you upload, the more intelligent it's going to get. All right, so that's just a warning that comes up when you upload those documents. The next one I wanted to show you was just a couple of the review features that you can see. You can see, as I mentioned, particular comments here. You can also see the comments specifically here. It's saying MTU was delisted on the 23rd of Feb. So please check, you're going to have to go back. We all make mistakes. For some reason, this wasn't, delisted. It might not have been officially delisted, or we may have missed it. So I've made a comment specifically there on that item. And then you'll see it down here as well. As a reviewer, I can basically check that as well. I can reply to the matters to check the trades. I can mark it as completed. And reply, and all that's stored then in the document. Okay, so you've got a lot of these review features. You can mark them all as completed. Very similar, as I said, a bit to the preparer. Generally, I don't use this option. I generally do things in bulk. I go through each one and then sort of do it by bulk as a reviewer. So then I'd sort of go, okay, reviewer, preparer, status, go into completed. So when I'm happy with mine, I can then mark these as completed. All right, so they are all marked as completed. So that's really the bulk update status. You can really go through it once you've done your reviews, use the integration that's in with the data to really speed up that process. We know work papers generally takes anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, depending on the size of the fund. So we're hoping what I'm showing you today can get that down, down by 30 minutes. It all adds up. So that's a review, bulk update. The other thing that's quite handy is you can then do this export. We know, okay, you might have external document solutions. You might have an auditor that's external that you want to generate the documents only. You want to produce the documents, or you might want to export the whole set of work papers. I'll just do the whole set to start with, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. It's pretty quick, like everything in 360. It'll mark off who's the reviewer, lead schedules, all your checklists, supporting docs, and then you've got these reports linked in. It took the guys quite a while to link the reports into the right section. They used to first list all at the bottom, but we're now linking them into the various sections, so it's easier to review on paper. It does go in alphabetical order. Once it sort of goes to chart level, and then inside the chart level, it then goes to alphabetical order. We find that works best. Some people are wanting to manipulate it further. You could use Adobe to edit this sort of document to move things around a bit. The other one, quite handy, and leaves an option where you don't want to show all your workings and checklists to the auditor. You just want to give them the document set. And you can just export the schedules only, but mostly the two most use cases I see is being able to zip all the documents into one archive. So saving a lot of time. It'll jump in, create this best practice, and all the documents will be sitting there. Okay, so that's the export options that at your disposal there. The next one is settings. Okay, so if you're more a reviewer, you're really the process, in charge of, what the quality standards are in your firm, then this is where you can go in. I'll just go back to settings. So up the top here, settings, and then for each chart of account, you can customize it. You can add a specific report into that particular work paper. So if I wanted to add balance review into here, that would then be the standard template for an SMSF. All right, so if I save that, it's going to move away from the system default, and it's going to save that as the firm default. Okay, I can also add additional checklist items, add that in here, and then again, if I save that, it's going to store that as the new firm default. If we load an update and we add more reports or more checklists, it's not going to overwrite anything. You would need to go back to the system defaults. Okay, so you can always revert back to the system defaults by clicking this button, and it will go back to whatever the system defaults. Quite handy if you've made an error or you've added the wrong report. So that's really where you can customize it. As I said, we've done this for trusts, companies, individuals as well. So you can really start seeing the consistency. Now, if you're not signed up for the beta, you'll only see SMSF here. You won't see trust, company, and individual. For our beta for Simple Invest clients, you'll see these extra tabs, but you can see that's enabled on my system. So that's the settings. You can really customize a lot. For things like trusts, we're going to automate the beneficiary schedule for work papers. We're going to automate the distributions schedule. So that's really a way to look at automating trusts as well, not just your SMSF work papers. All right, so we're right on time. I'll just jump back into the presentation. The next one I wanted to touch on, we might have a few auditors in the room. So what I just want to touch on there is if you're using accounting work papers, so just to be clear, we've talked about accounting work papers. What you can do to interact with your auditor, and this is what I found really useful, is you can export your docs like I showed there. You can also invite your auditor, and you can mark them as just read-only, so they can only see the work papers in read-only mode. All right, so what you can do there is just under user roles, if you do invite your auditor, it's just asking me to sign back in. Very secure. All right, that's just loading. Let's just give that a tick. And you'll see down below, you can obviously customize for your auditor. You turn a lot of things off. You can disable a lot of stuff so the auditor can't see too much, but just enough. And then you'll see work papers option here. All right, so I can turn on reports if I want, but I can also turn on work paper read only. And that setting I showed you before, you might want to turn that on, not for your auditor, but for your reviewer. You might want to give your reviewer that control of settings and not anyone else. So there's your two work paper settings. This one's quite good for your auditor, read only, and this one's quite good for your reviewer. So just a handy tip there if you're not aware of it. You can do that and invite then different users to these different groups. You can always create a custom group. I think there's there's custom groups here that I've created. I'll just jump back into the Prezo. So that's really inviting your auditor as read only. You've then also got these additional functions called send to audit. So you can send to these audit providers Seamless and ASF. You can actually send the work papers and docs through sort of the API. So that's quite handy. We're looking to do that with more audit providers. They sort of fall into two groups now. You know, you've sort of got your audit service, and then you've got your audit software where, you know, it's slightly different in one's providing a service, one's providing software. Sometimes it's a little bit of a grey area, but that send to audit function is available. So back in the work papers, you'll see this function notify. In this case, I'm linked to ASF audit, so I can notify ASF audits of that particular process. They will then get a notification that this this fund is ready for audit. So the other option with audit is then with your audit application software. So you can basically link into these different software providers. So 360's got connections with these software providers where you can basically link into those audit softwares. It's not quite as automated as this, but you can upload, as I said, the document packs into there. We are working with these different providers to make sure the work paper documents get sent through. At this stage, it's really just Cloud Office that's really bringing that work paper source through in this application software, but we will, you know, it is available to everyone. So if you are using one of these, get them to speak to Jeevan or myself, Matt, and we can have a conversation about automating some of those documents to be sent through the back end of the software. But you can certainly upload, as I showed, export and upload the zip file into those solutions right now. So that's just a little bit around the audit and around how you can sort of use accounting work papers with your audit. So that's really it. I've shown you the main features. Hopefully I've given you a couple of best practice tips on how to use work papers more efficiently. What's happening next? We're certainly not done here. The next thing is we're going to integrate those warnings, those observations. We're going to integrate registry. So we've already got the PDF produced, but what we're going to do is link the data for registry. So it's going to show you the very similar to what I showed you with the corporate actions. It's going to use that registry data. So another reason to use registry data. If you're not aware, it's part of the share pack where you can connect to registry and get the unit balances. That unit balances is now going to go into work papers. Also, we're going to get bank feed balances feeding through. These are coming up in Q2. And as I mentioned, the accounting work papers for trust companies and individuals. That'll be released out of beta around about June. Maybe a couple of weeks later, but we're really getting some great feedback on that, and this will just add more value to it. This is coming very soon. Jeevan, I spoke to him yesterday, the product manager for work papers, heads up the API team as well. What we're adding is really 2 additional sort of fields into the bank screen. I showed you a little bit how it can read a PDF and read the bank balance. So what we're going to do is integrate that even to the next level. So it's going to have 2 new fields, not there yet, but not too far off, a couple of weeks away, just after Easter, we hope, where we're going to add 2 new fields, one for confirm balance and one for balance source. So the balance source will be Smart Docs, which is what I showed you before, or it'll have BGL feed as a balance source. And then the other field next to it is confirm balance. So we're going to be showing you, effectively an external source of a bank balance, comparing that to ledger and then storing that in the work papers. So not just warnings, we'll actually be storing that. So that can be handy, again, for your auditor to know where that source has come from. So that's not too far off. All right, keep an eye on it. As I said, the guys are constantly updating work papers about every 2 to 3 weeks. So that's really it. Thank you for your time today. I know people will be wanting to get away for Easter. Thank you very much for your time. If you've got a little bit of time left and you don't need to smash out a few work papers or funds or lodgements before Easter comes upon us, then I'm going to come back in about 2 minutes, just read through the questions, and basically just see if there's any themes that may not have covered, and I can answer those. But if you need to get running, that's the end of the official session. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you got some value and something you can really take away as best practice into your firm. I'll take a quick break now, and I'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes, just when I've had a chance to review the questions. Keep putting your questions and answers in. If you've got a bit of time, the guys will be looking those as well. So I'll just pause. Thank you.